Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
If we do not signal the terminal decline of the fossil fuel era as we know it, we welcome our own terminal decline.
Urgent calls for action at the UN's climate conference. Can COP28 move the world closer to reaching some ambitious goals?
The Secretary General urges the members of the Security Council to press to avert a humanitarian catastrophe, and he appeals for a humanitarian ceasefire to be declared.
Pushing for an end to the violence in the Middle East. The Secretary General invokes a rare tool to address the crisis. Cleaning up plastic pollution. An award-winning program uses an innovative approach to tackling a growing problem. Next.
The first full week of the UN's climate conference is coming to a close. There were also signs of the renewed climate cooperation between China and the U.S., with the two nations co-hosting a summit aimed at reducing methane and other greenhouse gas emissions.
We're going to take specific and effective measures in energy, agriculture, and waste management so as to control methane emissions, guarantee energy security, and improve people's livelihoods. We're very willing to work with all parties to continuously improve our capacity and implement control measures, plans, and tasks in key areas.
No one country, no business, anywhere in the world will solve this problem by itself. It will take the essence of multilateralism and global cooperation.
I discussed some of the big issues facing COP28 delegates with Sunday Leonard. He's secretary of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel, an advisory body hosted by the UN Environment Program. Mr. Leonard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
2023 is quickly coming to an end, and it will be known as the hottest year on record. Glaciers and sea ice are melting rapidly. We're seeing more severe storms coming more quickly. Have we passed a tipping point?
The science shows currently that we've not passed the tipping point, but we are close to the tipping point. If we continue on current trend, the chances of exceeding the tipping point and not overshooting becomes very, very high. And technically, yes, we can still meet the Paris Agreement, but it's becoming more and more difficult.
What has actually changed since COP27? Has there been any meaningful progress?
The UNFCCC did an assessment as part of the global stocktake to see how we are doing in terms of the commitment that we've made to addressing climate change. And unfortunately, the assessment released in September shows that the pledges of the commitment that we have are not in the direction that will take us to 1.5 degrees, not even 2 degrees Celsius. And the UNEP emissions gap report shows that we are in the path to between 2.5 degrees or 2.9 degrees. So, yes, things are not looking good since COP27. But there are also some good things that are happening. We have more electric cars and the demand is also increasing. Countries, the demand for fossil fuel is reducing. So not the production of fossil fuel, but the demand for it is reducing. And if we continue in that path, there are chances that we can really meet or face down fossil fuel by 2030.
Also in November, the presidents of China and the United States recommitted their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and shift toward more renewable sources of energy at a much faster pace. They did that on the sidelines of the APEC conference, and all eyes were looking to see if they could come together on something on climate. How significant was that announcement, that recommitment ahead of COP28?
I think that's a very, very significant commitment and an achievement. So when you look at the issue of climate change, US and China basically take a significant chunk of the emissions that we face. But beyond the emission is also the finance, the funding to address climate change lies with this country, with these two countries. So having these two leaders signal that commitment also sends commitment to other leaders that we need to move in the right direction.
It has been 2 years since the Kunming Declaration, a global framework to halt biodiversity loss. Has there been any progress?
Most of the challenges we face are interconnected, and climate change and biodiversity are so interconnected. We've seen that nature-based solution can really help us address different aspects of climate change, both mitigation and adaptation. And increasing climate change too also affects biodiversity. So really thinking of these two together with other socioeconomic aspects is very, very important. So since the declaration, we've had the Global Biodiversity Framework approved. And then since then, the Global Environment Facility has been able to set up the GBBF fund. So now we have a fund that will actually support the objective of the Kunming Declaration. So I think that is a signal that we are making some progress and we can start actually implementing projects to address the challenge of biodiversity. But apart from commitment in the area of government, is also that we are seeing changes also in the private sector, in the business community, because businesses are now realizing the interconnection between the success of business and economy and biodiversity.
What about on an individual level?
Yeah.
You and I, what can we do? What can our part be to combat climate change?
So when we think about all the discussion you're having at the COP28, it's top down. It's the government, and they go back, and then we need to put policy in place. But individuals and communities have a significant role to play in addressing climate change. So I think a starting point for individuals is to spread the news. Many people still don't understand the issue, the challenges of climate change. So we have that role, especially those that are more aware. Then also, those that have the opportunity to influence the political discussion should engage in the political discussion, put pressure on your politicians, on your leaders to act. And then on our own role, I think, one, change your transportation. Use public transport where possible. If you can afford it, switch to electric cars because that saves the reduced greenhouse emission. Change the way you dress. Fast fashion is a major contributor to climate change. So address that area. Change your diet. What you eat, especially we that live in this very privileged part of the world, we already consume too much protein from cows, from sheep, from goat. So significantly reduce that. Don't waste food. 1/3 of the food that we produce are lost or wasted. When we throw away food, we are basically emitting methane into the atmosphere. Methane is actually more climate warming than CO2. Then come together within your community to work on climate action. And then those that are involved in investment, invest in climate-friendly stocks, climate-friendly, work with climate-friendly companies in terms of your investment moving forward.
Mr. Sunday Leonard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
The conflict in the Middle East remains a top priority for diplomats here at the UN. They're working to bring an end to the violence and provide desperately needed humanitarian aid for the civilians in the middle of the conflict. Shudaja is monitoring developments inside the halls of the United Nations. Deja.
Yes, Elaine, when we thought with another almost certain extension of ceasefire in Gaza Strip, COP28 would dominate the agenda of the UN this week. The unexpected happened. The humanitarian pause of fighting between Israel and Hamas ended. With the resumption of Israeli military operation in Gaza Strip, the focus yet again went back to Gaza instead of Dubai. Now, 3 things on Gaza. First, the UN humanitarian operation. Though UN is still trying to get as much humanitarian aid into Gaza, the fighting, especially the fighting in southern Gaza, I'm afraid to say, left the UN very few options to fulfill its commitment to Gaza people. Is it because of the security reason that some of those humanitarian deliveries cannot be achieved, or because of the prevention of Israeli army, they wouldn't allow those humanitarian
From what I
deliveries?
understand, it is both the resumption of the fighting and a number of cases of what you referred to.
Second, it seems Israel is now at war not only on Hamas but also on the UN. This is how Israeli representative to the UN Ambassador Erdan talked about an investigation on UN women, which is accused of neglecting sexual and gender-based violence by Hamas during its October 7th attack.
The investigation that truly must be carried out is an investigation of UN women's indifference to the heinous crimes against Israeli women.
And here is how the spokesperson replied to me.
First of all, the Secretary General's full confidence in UN Women and the leadership and the executive director of UN Women. And I think that's clear and unambiguous. If you have any questions regarding more details of UN Women's statement, I would refer you to them.
So technically speaking, if there should be an investigation on the UN body, would that go through General Assembly, or?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that, but as I said, I think the statement issued by UN Women was very clear and to the point.
Also, Israel decided not to extend the visa for Lynn Hastings, the UN's humanitarian coordinator in the Palestinian territories, over her refusal to condemn Hamas. Her visa is due to expire next week. And third, Secretary General of the United Nations has made a dramatic move to invoke Article 99 of the UN Charter, which said the Secretary General may bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter which, in his opinion, may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security. Of course, everyone in the briefing room was asking why it's a big deal for the Secretary General to do so.
Within the constitutional context of the United Nations, it's a very dramatic move. I mean, we understand that the perception from the outside world may be a little different, but for us, it is a very powerful move on behalf of the Secretary General, and we hope that members of the Security Council will be moved by it, and we hope the international community will be moved by it to push and put in place a humanitarian ceasefire.
The Arab countries confirmed that they are trying to draft another resolution in Security Council to bring a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. But when asked the implementation of the last resolution, the ambassador of Palestine, Mr. Mansour, replied this. Ambassador, do you think the last Security Council resolution has been implemented?
No, not yet. It should be.
Elaine.
Shudija, thanks.
Coming up.
It is important to see that if we are able to become more resilient, we will have a more resilient world, and it benefits everyone.
UN Insider.
We are Cgtn, China Global Television Network.
Pollution poses an increasing threat to the world's oceans. More than 17 million metric tons of debris clogged the oceans in 2021. And that figure could double or even triple by 2040. But a Chinese project is helping remove and process marine plastic waste. It's called the Blue Circle Initiative and has won the UN's Champions of the Earth Award. Wang Chue has the details.
A moment of joy and fulfillment as their efforts finally pay back. This team's program emerged from 2,500 nominations, standing out for its innovative treatment of marine plastic waste. Under the project, these plastic bottles have just started their journey of recycling.
The program not only boosted our income, but also changed our perception of environmental protection.
Backed by digital technology, the project encourages people to collect marine waste. That waste is converted into high-value, environmentally friendly products, with revenues distributed among everyone involved.
The added value of the end products made by marine waste plastic not only boosts recycling efficiency, but it also motivates people to collect it. It's a system that is sustainable in the long term.
So far, over 10,700 tons of marine waste have been collected through the project, the largest of its kind in China.
Environmental protection and economic benefits can go hand in hand. I think that's why this project won the award. It's worthy of global promotion.
Marine plastic pollution is a pressing global issue. The UN says the amount of marine plastic waste will almost triple by 2040 if no action is taken. That means along every meter of coastline around the world, 50 kilograms of plastic waste will pile up. Through empowerment and encouragement, this project could provide some of the answers in preventing that happening. Wang Qiwei, Cgtn.
Around the world, young people are driving biodiversity and climate action. Jevanik Henry is one of them. He's a climate and development professional and a member of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. Jevanik, how did you decide that you wanted to be on the front lines of fighting climate change? Was there any particular moment in your life or an experience that became the turning point for you?
Interestingly, I don't think it was a choice that I chose to be on the front lines of the climate fight. In fact, coming from a small and developing state in the Caribbean, we are essentially on the front lines of the climate crisis. It has its multiple effects on our economies and our lives and livelihoods. And I always recall that day on the eve of Christmas, actually, back in 2013, when the island was devastated by a tropical storm, which left, loss of lives, loss of significant infrastructure. And at that time, it opened my eyes to wonder what is causing this issue and how I can contribute to the solution. And I think from there on, it has sort of set the foundation. Sad to say, it took a unfortunate situation, but it opened my eyes, and now I feel that I'm in position to drive the fight, but also encourage others to join into the fight for the climate fight. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you've seen over the years just growing up.
Yeah. So I grew up first from the small Caribbean island of St. Lucia. And inevitably, we're surrounded by the ocean, and tourism is a key part of our economy. So you would understand the fact that with climate change, the level of the impacts, it affects across sectors. I don't think at this point in time there is one sector that is immune to the impacts of climate change. So seeing how this has affected, for example, with sea level rise, how this is affecting our coastal areas, how with the change in temperatures, it's affecting our farmers, how, what's happening in the oceans affecting our fishermen, which is a core part of our economy. It has made me want to question, how can I contribute to supporting these critical sectors? Because after all, it's about protecting people and protecting livelihoods.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your role as a youth climate advisor for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. What have you been able to talk to him about and advise as someone in your position as a young person?
I think from a young person perspective, it's a case whereby it's about driving action at the local level as a start. And I think that has sort of been my core foundation, being able to build that drive that action at the local level, and now being able to sort of provide advice to the Secretary General, particularly on his acceleration agenda, which essentially sets a pathway for how we can create a more livable planet, which would include cutting down emissions, which would include, of course, achieving climate justice, and essentially making this planet a bit more, I don't want to say greener, but a bit more comfortable for not only for us, but the future generation. So that is where we come in as young people to provide that sort of technical, practical recommendations to the Secretary General to see that, one, how can you increase the involvement of young people in driving climate action, but also looking at from the technical level, how do we ensure that states to live up to their commitments, to be that sort of accountability, which we so definitely need.
We've said states most in need. There's always been this sort of struggle between the smaller countries like yours and bigger countries about responsibility and the financing. Talk to us about that balance.
I think when we speak about financing in this current context, it is important that we establish that funding should come from all sources. And I keep lamenting that in the sense that from, yes, developed parties, private sector, and all the key area agencies to drive this progress. Because we are at a state right now that we understand that the small sectional states cannot do it alone, but private sector has to play a role. After all, the private sector has, unfortunately, in some ways or the other, contributed to the climate crisis. Within the whole context of finance, it's important that we understand that, yes, there are varying circumstances, the vulnerabilities, but primarily, of course, developing countries, particularly given the fact that many of us have not contributed significantly to the climate crisis. But of course, the science is telling that we are on the front lines and we are bearing the significant burden. And therefore, it is simply fair and just that we are allocated a fair share of any of the resources that will allow us to build resilience. And I think it's also key to understand that it's not just in developing countries making the noise about the need for financing, but in us being able to build resilience. It actually contributes to the wider global stability, in the sense that you're looking at issues of displacement and all the variety of issues which climate crisis brings upon states. It is important that if we are able to become more resilient, we will have a more resilient world, and it benefits everyone.
What are you most optimistic about looking at COP28? And as a young person, what would you want to tell or advise people around the world right now?
I think what gives me hope is that looking back, for instance, in 2015, when, of course, we secured the landmark Paris Agreement, it was still a very small section of the global population, advocating and pushing for this. A few years down the line, we're now in 2013, and we've seen it's a wider cross-section. We've seen most civil society groups receiving some key private sector players joining the fight. There's a greater effort towards this, what I call this green revolution, which so greatly needed, which for me is a positive. It's a sense that we have sort of broadened that scope of where people are more educated and understanding of the issues. So it gives me hope that we are driving solutions, because it's important amidst all of the challenges that we identify that there are solutions. There are solutions. And there are young people who are driving these solutions. And I continue to encourage not only young people, but other sectors to continue to invest in research and innovation that will allow us to tackle the multitude of challenges we face. Because in that way, if we continue to drive solutions in a sustainable manner, I think that will set us on a positive path. So that's what gives me hopes that we are seeing solutions being implemented. It's about scaling up.
Jevanik Henry, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up.
It just makes you feel, confident and stronger than you know you are.
UN Insider.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
$1.3 billion people around the world live with a significant disability. That's about 16% of the global population. 80% of people with disabilities live in developing nations. Sunday marked the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, a day intended to raise awareness, break down barriers, and create a more accessible world. Sports can play an important role in that effort, as we learned during a visit with some wheelchair athletes.
I was actually born into a wheelchair. I have a condition called spina bifida. I had rarely ever seen someone else in a wheelchair, ever. And when I got here, I was seeing people in wheelchairs with other disabilities left and right, and it was just ecstatic.
We're so happy you came today. I've known Lex since he was 6 years old. I remember he came in and he's bouncing all over the place. He's never gone fast before. He's just speeding around. However, if he's going from A to B, it's as quick as possible.
It just makes you feel, confident and stronger than you know you are. It's honestly made me a better student. It's made me a better person in general.
When you have a disability, you live in a world of can't. And that's the thing in our program, we try and tell the kids, what they can do.
I've always been looked down on because I'm in a wheelchair. This is what I love. This is what I've been doing for almost 10 years. So whenever I'm out here, it's like I'm home. Go! Just because you think you can't do something doesn't mean you can't. You're more capable of anything that you can put your mind to if you try hard enough, if you work for it.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider.